What if I told you that the global financial system is already changing and most people, one, realize it until it's too late? For most of us, money feels permanent, stable, untouchable. We assume the system works because it always has, but systems don't collapse when people panic. They collapse when people stop noticing. There are no tanks rolling through streets, no wars being declared, no emergency headlines flashing across your screen. Just money, quietly changing hands. Behind closed doors, away from attention, a different financial architecture is being assembled, not in opposition, not in rebellion, but in parallel. China is not attacking the global financial system. China is replacing it. And the most dangerous part is that it doesn't look dangerous at all. The global financial system is built on trust. But trust is not enforced by fairness. It is enforced by power. For decades, the world was told a simple story, that the global financial system was neutral, open, rules-based, a system where anyone could participate, as long as they followed the rules. But those rules were written by someone at a specific time for a specific purpose. And that purpose was never neutrality. The modern financial system was built after global war, at a moment when one side had capital, infrastructure, and the ability to define what normal looked like. The US dollar didn't become dominant because it was perfect. It became dominant because everything else was built around it. Trade was priced in dollars, debt was issued in dollars, commodities were settled in dollars. Over time, the dollar stopped being just a currency. It became the foundation layer of global finance. And when the foundation belongs to you, everything above it depends on you. But currency dominance alone is not enough to control a system. What truly matters is access. And access is controlled through payment rails. The most important of those rails is SWIFT. SWIFT is often misunderstood. It doesn't move money. It doesn't store money. It moves something far more powerful. It moves permission. Permission to send, permission to receive, permission to exist inside the system. Every international transaction, every cross-border payment, passes through layers of approval, and those layers are invisible until they are taken away. The system works perfectly, right up until it doesn't. This is where trust quietly turns into leverage. Sanctions are often described as political tools, but in reality, they are financial switches. With a few decisions, reserves can be frozen, transactions blocked. Entire economies isolated, no missiles, no soldiers, just accounts that stop responding. And when money stops moving, everything else eventually stops too. This is what it means to weaponize finance. And once a system proves it can be weaponized, everyone inside that system starts thinking about escape. China has watched this very carefully. Not as a challenger, not as a revolutionary, but as a long-term observer. It watched countries lose access overnight. It watched reserves become unusable. It watched trade grind to a halt, not because of economics, but because of permission. And China understood something fundamental. Any system that depends on trust will eventually be used to enforce obedience. This realization changed everything. China did not see the global financial system as unfair. It saw it as unstable. Unstable because power was too concentrated. Unstable because rules could change instantly. Unstable because participation was conditional. And for a country thinking in decades, not election cycles, that was unacceptable. China didn't ask how to win the system. It asked how to survive it. This isn't about money. It's about control. At this point, most people still think this is a story about money, currencies, exchange rates, who wins and who loses. But that framing is wrong, because money is not the source of power anymore. Control is. In the modern world, power does not come from owning resources alone. It comes from managing flows, who trades with whom, how often, through which channels, under what conditions. The most powerful actors are not those who move the most money, but those who decide how money is allowed to move. This is why transaction data matters more than currency itself. Every payment tells a story. Who depends on whom? Who can wait? Who cannot? If you can see the flows, you can predict behavior. And if you can predict behavior, you can shape it. China understands this deeply. It does not seek free markets. Free markets are volatile, unpredictable, difficult to manage. China wants predictable systems with predictable outcomes. This is why control does not arrive through force. It arrives through structure, payment systems, trade standards, settlement rules. These things don't feel political, they feel technical. And technical systems are trusted without question. People don't argue with infrastructure, they just use it. When a country begins settling trade through Chinese-linked systems, nothing dramatic happens. Trade becomes faster, costs become lower, processes become smoother. No one feels controlled. But something important changes. The country's financial behavior becomes visible, its dependencies become measurable, its vulnerabilities become clear. Invisibility is power. China doesn't need to tell countries what to do. It only needs to understand what they can't afford not to do. If a nation relies on Chinese supply chains, Chinese settlements, Chinese financing, then pressure does not need to be applied directly. The system applies it automatically. This is the difference between hard power and structural power. Hard power demands compliance. Structural power makes compliance the easiest option. And the easiest option is the one most people choose. This is why China's approach feels invisible. There are no ultimatums, no red lines, no dramatic confrontations, just incentives, and incentives quietly shape behavior over time. When your economy depends on a system, you begin to think in ways that protect that system. Even without being asked, this is how control becomes normalized, not through fear, but through habit. China is not trying to convince the world to follow it. It is creating conditions where following becomes automatic. That is far more effective and far harder to reverse, because once behavior changes, power has already shifted. Money was never the end goal. Money was just the entry point. Control is the destination. If this shift is really happening, why does almost no one see it? The answer is simple. Because it doesn't look like a crisis. There are no collapsing banks, no emergency meetings broadcast on television, no dramatic countdown clocks. Just normal days, continuing as usual. Most people are trained to recognize danger only when it is loud, when markets crash, when currencies collapse, when panic spreads. But real financial control never announces itself that way. It arrives quietly, through small decisions, routine agreements, technical adjustments, things that feel boring. And boring is invisible. The system doesn't break. It slowly rebalances. Each country makes what seems like a rational choice. Lower costs, faster trade, fewer conditions. No one thinks they are surrendering power. They think they are optimizing, and optimization never feels dangerous until it's irreversible. Most people confuse stability with safety. But stability can be engineered, and when it is, change feels like normal. By the time consequences appear, they no longer look like choices. They look like reality. And reality is very hard to question. Not the strongest economies, not the most independent ones, but the ones that cannot afford disruption. Developing nations, export-driven economies, countries whose growth depends on continuous trade. When your economy relies on manufacturing capacity, foreign demand, and external financing, you don't get to pause. You can't afford delays. You can't afford friction. You can't afford instability. So you choose the system that works, even if it slowly limits your options. Dependency doesn't feel like control at first. It feels like survival. Debt ties you in. Supply chains lock you in. Payment systems keep you there. And once your economy is structured around a system, leaving it becomes more dangerous than staying. That's the trap. Not force, not coercion, but dependence. And dependence doesn't need enforcement. It enforces itself. China is not trying to destroy the global financial system. It doesn't need to. It understands something fundamental. Systems don't collapse because of enemies. They collapse because of internal pressure. Debt, weaponization, loss of trust. Each time the system is used as leverage, it teaches others why alternatives matter. China is not rushing this process. It is waiting. Waiting for fatigue, waiting for overreach, waiting for inevitability. And when the moment comes, the replacement will not need to be announced. It will already be in use. So here's the real question. Is this shift accidental or carefully planned? And if the system is already changing, what does that mean for everyone still relying on it? Comment what you think below. This was only part 1. In the next video, we'll look at how global supply chains turn dependency into power.